So welcome everybody. Hope everyone's enjoying the Payment Summit so far. My name is Robert Hyde. I'm the CEO of Payment Source, and really excited about the topic today. I think we've got some great speakers and a lot of good discussion looking forward to. So before we get started, just some housekeeping activities. First of all, if you want to ask a question, we're going to save some time at the end of the session for some questions. So just use the Ask the Speaker button on the side of your screen, and you can type in your question there, and then you can vote on questions as well. You can also click on Join the Conversation if you want to text or chat with other attendees during the session, and just keep in mind that during this session, your mic and video will be disabled. So it really is just about engaging with us using the chat or the Ask the Speaker kind of functions. All right, and so we can kick it off. So as I said, I'm CEO of Payment Source. Payment Source is a Canadian company. We're one of Canada's best managed, and we work to really empower inclusion by offering alternative methods of payment that enables more Canadians to pay and be paid. And so financial inclusion is something that's very near and dear to my heart and to our organization. So this is a great topic for us to dig into a little bit more today. Today I'm joined by a number of business leaders from the Source, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, DirectPay, and the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around the table and let each of our speakers here introduce themselves. But I'm also going to ask if they could kick us off with the first question, which is, what does financial inclusivity mean to your organization and to your role within that organization? And we'll start it off with Mark. So Mark, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about financial inclusivity.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rob. Great to be here today. Yeah, my name is Mark Tiainen, and I head up DirectPay, our newest product that allows anyone with a bank account to shop online and pay for their purchase in real time using their secure banking credentials. Look, financial inclusion to me is as much about choice and smart payment options as it is about access to traditional banking services, if you will. Consider that accessibility, inclusion, diversity are all core tenets of Canada. Yet when it comes to online payments, I mean, we're kind of a closed door. We over-index on credit cards. We've done, little to recognize changing consumer preferences, let alone support, inclusive payment options or fiscal responsibility. And when I say fiscal responsibility, what I mean is that financial stress is now recognized as a mainstream issue and a social problem in Canada. The kind of stress that consumer debt places on users can negatively impact mental and physical health, work productivity, family life. And across all household income groups, we're seeing concerning 3-year trends. Even high-income families as well. 63% of households earning over $100,000 are stating that money worries are causing them emotional stress. And combine that with soaring home prices, recent inflation, more availability and reliance on credit, even the use of installment plans for everyday goods such as groceries, and you can start to see how things aren't sustainable. I didn't really want to start off on a negative point. So quickly, what I'll say is that I'm really encouraged by some of the macro trends that we're seeing. We're starting to see the shift in consumer support for smart payment methods, such as bank payments being used for online purchases. For example, Ideal in the Netherlands captures more than half of online purchases. GiroPay in Germany is their most popular payment method. In markets all over, bank payments are exploding. And I think we're at the cusp of seeing that trend here in Canada. In addition, my son, for example, is being taught financial literacy course in his grade 8 class at school. My generation didn't have that. So all this to say is that I think we're going to start seeing a shift in consumer attitudes when it comes to paying for things. We're already seeing an entirely new generation that's grown up digital. They don't carry wallets, let alone cards. And they've also grown up with a different outlook to saving and spending compared to previous generations. So when we talk about financial inclusion, and especially at DirectPay, meeting these new consumers head on with payment options that appeal to them and every Canadian is going to be incredibly important moving forward.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and I think digging into what's happening globally versus what's happening here in Canada is important to look at. Next, we'll move to Tara. Do you want to give us your intro and your thoughts as well?
Why, hello there. My name is Tara, and I lead omnichannel and customer experience here at The Source. Omnichannel, it really is the definition I think about is connecting our stores and our site, connecting digital and physical, bringing the most out of both channels, but really with the customer at the center of everything that we do. And such a great, great question. I'll have to say, I've been a lead on diversity and inclusion at The Source for several years. I won't say that we've actually looked at it from the financial lens, so what an exciting conversation to be having. When I think about our brand pillar here at The Source, it really is about making shopping for tech easy. And when you think about that, we think about distribution. We tend to talk product and price. We're now taking it to the next level and really starting to look at how does that translate across the entire customer journey. And when I think about payment and I think about accessibility to payment, that is really key. And we've been going through a journey, as most of us have through the pandemic, of trying to connect Canadians with the product, making it easy. And we're certainly starting to see some real challenges. And I think, Mark, you've called out so many of them. Challenges from a payment perspective, ultimately leading into a challenge in your family life, challenge with your mental. And I think that this conversation, the fact that we're having it in such a different way, really starts to show where Canada is and where we're taking the lead in some of these different, I would say, world changing elements. So thank you for having me.
No, that's great. And you talk about the customer journey, and bringing payment into that is an important aspect. And in many cases, it's kind of been an afterthought in some cases, because it's almost like ubiquitous, and we know what payment is and we know how that works. And as things have shifted, obviously with the pandemic, that's definitely impacted how we think about the customer journey and the payment kind of piece to that. So that's great. All right, we'll move to our next speaker. So Corinne, you want to introduce yourself and talk about your thoughts on financial inclusion?
Great, thank you. So my name is Corinne Pohlmann. I am the Senior Vice President of National Affairs and Partnerships for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which represents 95,000 small and medium-sized businesses across Canada, all of which are independently owned Canadian companies. And my sort of perspective on inclusive pay has to do with not so much the consumer side, which is important, I think we're well represented here, but also on the merchant side, and making sure that as a small business, the opportunity to accept payments is also there, because often some of the newer payment systems isn't necessarily as accessible for smaller companies. Payments can be a very expensive undertaking for a lot of small businesses who decide to sort of go more into some experimental way of doing things. Certainly the last few years has seen a real shift, of course, away from cash into more digital payments, which has also come at a cost for many of these small businesses already struggling. So to me, inclusivity is beyond just the customer. It's also making sure that it's inclusive for those small businesses that want to be able to provide these options for their customers, but do it in a way that doesn't really bite them in their bottom line. So I think that's an important element that I'm hoping to bring to the table today, and part of the discussion that we can have.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, because you get barriers on the merchant side which can prevent inclusion. So when you talk about inclusion, how do you include every retailer or every merchant in that story as well? And that's better for everyone, right? So if you have everyone participating in the economy, both on the consumer and the business side, you're really giving choice, and you're empowering kind of competition and all the things that we want to see, right? All right, Peter, maybe I'll leave you to kind of close us out here on the intro and your thoughts, maybe from the government perspective. Oh, you're muted.
What would it be if someone wasn't muted?
Right.
My name is Peter Liber. Good afternoon. I'm a senior account executive with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, the Ontario government, and I'm responsible for financial services and fintech. So I sort of covered that part of the sectors that we cover, of the key sectors that we cover. And I spend my time with mostly with fintech and working with companies that are providing choice and providing new innovative solutions. Financial inclusion is interesting because I don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. I guess I'm at a stage in my life, and my wife and I, we don't, the challenges that we had in our late 20s and early 30s are not the challenges that we have now. So I think it's about offering customers choice. It's about offering financial literacy to young people, as Mark mentioned, because he's right. I mean, if your son gets it in grade 8, Mark, yeah. I mean, we never got it, right? So, yeah. I mean, your mom or your dad took you to the local Big 5 bank, and you got a passbook, a very sticky bank as well. And chances are most people are still with the bank that they started with. And, credit cards and debit was about the extent of it for about 20 years there. Now there's so many options available, and they make it so much easier for people to securely pay for things that they need to pay for. So I'm excited every day when I talk to fintechs that are working on solutions that are innovative, that are new, that are easy for people to use, and and much more inclusionary than in the past. I mean, it's funny. I saw this. I saw the other day that 3% of Canadians are unbanked, and I thought, well, 3%, that's not bad. But it's a million people. I mean, there's a million people that still aren't banked, and if we have solutions and things for them to bring them in, I'm all for it, and I think that's a good thing to do. So, quite interesting times.
Thanks, and I think the government can't afford to not include people, right? So the government, to a certain extent, right, has to look at all those things of those million people. The other thing that really stood out in what you said there, Peter, was just, the idea of not, it's easy for us to look in the mirror and say, well, what would I do? What do I pay? How do I do something? And to assume that that's the way everyone else is. Right. And that's a very dangerous kind of thing, because then it actually closes the mind, it closes the door to what's really needed out there. And so it's important for us. I know from our company's perspective, we always are trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the customers and the consumers that use our services, and they don't necessarily behave the way I do, or have the same needs that I have. So that's a really important point. All right, great. So let's move on into kind of the next question here, which is really around debit. And we see debit as a popular choice for Canadians, especially in retail, in store, brick and mortar. But consumers and businesses, they're still looking for other ways to kind of pay and be paid. So what are you seeing in the alternative payment space? What are those alternatives that are out there? And how do we support alternative payments as a society? So I'll start with you, Mark, from maybe the consumer perspective, and then we'll let Corinne look at it from the business perspective. So Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just, emphasize the point that you made that, debit does continue to be a very popular choice for Canadians at the point of purchase, but in physical retail locations. Online, however, the awareness, availability, and even adoption of various debit payment solutions remains relatively low. I mean, the gap between in-store and online is quite large. Look, we know e-commerce and online payments are growing in Canada. There's no surprise here, and I think this is where most everyone's conversations are focusing on. But what we may not also know is that online payment friction is also on the rise in Canada. Almost 3 out of every 5 Canadians have reported abandoning their card at the checkout due to payment-related issues. I mean, this could be as simple as a declined credit card, right? But it's also starting to happen due to a lack of a preferred payment method, and it also could be, perceived privacy or security concerns. And we're starting to see this come back to the forefront. Let me take this a little bit further. Look at our reliance on digital connectivity, and especially the more integrated checkouts that we're starting to see now. We're moving towards social selling and the metaverse, even as an example. It's the next wave in commerce. And this is really starting to open up an entirely new set of payment-related friction that merchants and consumers are going to have to deal with. How do you authorize a purchase in real time, yet limit access to your personal and financial details, especially in the virtual world? We're still hearing data breaches and stories about leaked credit cards and such. It's not to mention the cost to retailers dealing with fraud, security, or chargebacks. And so I go back to one of the recent surveys that we conducted with Liber, and we spoke to Canadians, and over 50% of those surveyed told us that they would be more likely to shop online and embrace the next wave of commerce. The metaverse and social selling as an example that I mentioned, if they didn't have to share their payment information or risk having a merchant store their personal details. Like this is coming up again. And I look at this as no different than how a merchant forcing an account creation at checkout really kills conversion in e-commerce, right? So this brings back to the original question. We know there is a consumer affinity for debit solutions and paying for one's purchase from their bank. That's evidenced by in-store payment preferences. It's evidenced by macro trends. And right now we have the capability, even with DirectPay, we have the capability to allow users to select their bank, authorize their payment with Face ID, for example, and not have the merchant access any personal financial details. So, when I look at alternative payment methods, and I struggle to call them alternative because I really do see these becoming mainstream as we move forward. When it comes to APMs or best practices, my advice right now is that we need to continue innovation and adoption of these smart, secure payment options that are going to support the next wave of commerce and consumer preferences, bank payments, and so on. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't even seen yet, so that's going to come to play, and it's a really exciting time.
Great. Yeah, maybe instead of calling them alternative, it's anything but credit or anything but cards, right? Like, what else is out there other than cards? So great points around trust, around security, really key aspects for any consumer decision, right? Corinne, do you want to maybe give the small business view on what they're worried about, what they're thinking about in terms of this?
Sure. And debit is also well liked, I'd say, by many small retailers as well, because it's probably the least costly form of acceptance. But you're right, it's not so, it works in store, not so much online. And given the massive sort of move more to an online world over the last couple of years, that becomes a bit more problematic for many of the merchants as well, who find themselves having to deal with much higher credit card costs in order to be able to transact online. But the thing about small businesses is they're super creative, right? And so definitely things like e-transfer, we've seen a massive shift in businesses using e-transfer. I don't think its original purpose was for businesses to be using e-transfer. However, during the pandemic, it became a viable alternative for many very small companies who really had no other way to receive payment over the phone or online, that because the credit card was so expensive or they didn't have it set up or whatever the case might be. So that became a tool. So it's an interesting kind of thing to sort of watch as a phenomenon, and clearly there's a demand for that. So if there can be more solutions like that are low cost, easy to use, and I would say that would be super attractive to a lot of smaller merchants, I think. But I think something else that Mark said that's really important is merchants don't want to hold on to their private information either, right? So that's, there's lots of rules around that. There's lots of regulations. They don't want to have to deal with all of that. That adds cost to them as well. So if there's solutions out there where it's a seamless transaction, where they don't have to worry about holding on to all this private information, that would go, I think, a long way. And I think that's something that would definitely be welcomed by many of them. So I think those are sort of some of the solutions that can be really helpful. And I think innovation is key in all of this. And we have an opportunity now to really think about what works well for the consumer, but also what works well for those smaller merchants. Again, I want to emphasize that the bigger guys are going to be able to adapt these things quickly. They have that ability. They may even be some of the ones innovating on that front, but making sure that they're scalable to allow smaller companies to take advantage of as well is going to be really key in how we sort of evolve the payments space going forward. So I think that's sort of where I would sit on where things are going to be going in the future for smaller companies. One more thing I wanted to mention, though, and I think it's an important one too. A lot of smaller firms, and Mark mentioned this too, are also dealing with a lot more fraud and chargebacks. And so this is another thing that needs to be somewhat addressed. As we move more to the online environment, we hear more and more about folks who find themselves selling a product, having it sort of overturned by the credit card company. They're out the product, they're out the money that they had gotten for the product, and they're being charged a fee for this entire transaction. So any new solutions that allows folks to take it right out of their bank account, again, as Mark talked about, I think is a good thing, because you won't have that issue of dealing with the credit at the same time. But that's a growing issue that needs to be addressed as well as we go forward.
Yeah, so the finality of payment almost replicating the values of cash, right? In the old store world, why did you like cash as a merchant, right? Because it was final, it was in hand, right? Literally in your hand, right? And now you have to manage it and deposit it and deal with all those things, but there is benefits to that as well, right? So how do we kind of continue to find those benefits as we move to a more digital world? I think that's really great. All right, so moving on to the next question, we want to talk a bit more. Let's maybe talk about the gorilla, the 100-pound gorilla of credit cards, and are they deterring financial inclusion? They are and will continue to remain the most probably used credit card or payment method. So it's not about necessarily reducing it to a smaller amount. It's more just about creating other choice and other options for people. So maybe we'll start with Peter. What are your thoughts on kind of things like credit card, but also even newer things like buy now, pay later? How can retailers or government organizations, safely even offer these choices? So we'll go with Peter, and then I'll have Tara chime in as well.
I think you need more. You need more and different solutions other than a credit card that's charging you 18 to 22% interest a month. And I think that as financial literacy grows and as younger people become more aware of what they pay, how they pay, and I guess ultimately how much interest they pay, they're looking for other solutions. And the buy now, pay later thing is really. I mean, it's amazing how it's taken off in the last few years, and there aren't many websites that I go looking at for products and things like that don't offer afterpay or quad pay or any of those solutions. I think that, they seem to be attractive because I don't think they have much impact on your current credit card status. But then that's a little scary too. If you're overdrawn or over maxed out on your credit cards, and then you're using quad pay to buy something that you should probably be saving money for, and not sort of, the problem with instant gratification is it's often not fast enough. You want it now, and so I mean, I think the credit card rates is sort of what really, I think, get people looking for other solutions. And, the more that a retailer can offer, I mean, I think it helps with customer retention. It helps with loyalty. People want, we're entering this sort of new time where people want to pay for things the way they want to pay for them, not just one or two ways. And it's funny, there's small merchants I go to that won't take a credit card. And now there's more and more merchants, it seems, that won't take cash. So it depends on I mean, but when you think of it, for a smaller retailer and small business is the backbone of the economy. If it's cost them too much money and it's too difficult for them, then they have to look for other solutions, and they have to offer people other solutions. So it's if it's seamless and it's efficient and it's convenient, it can be personalized, and above all secure, then I think people will adopt it. I mean, I think people are asking for it now, more than ever before, it seems. 80% of consumers, I think I read recently, expect small business to continue offering pandemic-friendly kind of payments. And we were talking about this last week. I mean, when was the last time you went to the bank machine and put $40, $60, $80, $100 into your pocket? And since COVID, we really haven't been able to, or haven't wanted or had to do that. So it's kind of interesting, things like contactless payment, digital wallets, and I think we're going to see a larger sort of the uptake on that in the next couple of years is going to be huge, I think.
Great. So Tara, maybe give us the not so small business kind of perspective on it. And, how are you guys thinking about, the things that you offer, the buy now, pay later versus, credit card? Are you guys offering all of those things, and how are you balancing that out?
Well, I think Mark touched on it at the very beginning. It is about choice. And I think that's where our focus is letting customers have the choice of what payment type works for them. We certainly are still seeing a high abandonment rate in cart. And you think about how hard each retailer works in small business. I love the lens that you're bringing, Corinne. I hadn't even really thought about that. You work so hard to acquire the customer. You work so hard to engage them with the content, the product, the add to cart. And most retailers would know you probably only get 10 to 12% are adding to cart. So you finally get them in checkout, and to have such a high abandonment rate because you don't have the payment choice for the customer, it truly it's defeating when you think about the investment from the start of that journey to the very end. If we can actually integrate it and make every choice and every choice available to the customer from a digital perspective and e-com perspective. And the one challenge I think we all have to consider is, building it from a digital perspective is one thing, but replicating and giving the same experience into our physical locations is also key. What we don't want to do is continue to drive a wedge between, or have a disparity between an experience in store and an experience online that causes even more friction down the road. So when I look at it, the focus on credit, I actually want to shift more and focus on choice and flexibility. We launched the buy now, pay later, and we do have a certain engagement, and the certain engagement is happening in certain categories at certain basket sizes. And then there's some customers that are tending to, for the smaller purchases, for the lower basket size, they do the interact payment quick, or they do the buy online pickup in store. So I think that if I can build something that captures the need at the time for the customer, then we're going to have that success in driving up our cart completions. When I really think about how where subscription is starting to play, I think that's going to be something that's going to be very different for all of us in the future. We're competing with credit cards. When we think about competition with credit card has brought loyalty. Credit card has brought in all of the things that talk to our hearts, the points, the fact that you can redeem miles for flights, the fact that you can redeem and get gift cards. There's this piece that's tied to the credit card that is making it very, very enticing to continue that usage. Where we're going to have to get and where we're going to have to look at for our customers is, what are the other benefits? What else can we offer to that customer that makes these different tender types more exciting or more interesting?
No, that's great. I know in our experience, because we, have solutions that are offering payment methods. When we've added a different payment method, it hasn't reduced, the old payment method. It's additive. Everything we do is additive. It doesn't cannibalize, which is really interesting behavior. And in fact, sometimes I've found that by adding methods, it actually increases the overall sense of trust, and all payment methods, right? So it's a little bit of like, all boats kind of get raised in that scenario through the choice, right? Mm-hmm. So choice leads to trust leads to increased sales and increased intimacy with that customer, right? Mm-hmm. Which is really great. All right, so we're as normal, we're kind of falling behind a little bit on time. I want to give a little bit room for questions, and just remind everyone, please just enter questions in here, and we'll leave a little bit of room at the end for some questions. If not, I'll pull one of our other questions back in. But maybe just to kind of summarize, what payment trends can retailers expect to see more of in the coming months, and what should they be looking for? And Mark, we'll start with you.
All right, great. Well, first off, let me say that we haven't really seen the checkout page be as strategic as it should be for retailers in Canada. It really is that last mile in a customer's overall purchase experience, and the final opportunity for a retailer to impart that positive experience and influence that conversion that is so desired. Yet we tend to treat, the payment experience as an administrative function, right? Payment needs and preferences, we've talked about this today, vary greatly from one consumer group to another. Yet the online payment process is often one size fits all. It's not seen as strategic or an opportunity for optimization. So quickly, I refer back to a quote by Lucy Peng, one of the founders of Alibaba. She said that payments are going to play an ever significant role in the development of e-commerce moving forward. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're seeing the proliferation of new payment methods emerging, and they are starting to take share from and perhaps slowing the growth of credit card usage in North America. So I guess if I'm looking to grow my business, future-proof my business, if you will, I would be looking to optimize that last mile in my customer's buying journey. What that means to me is API-driven solutions that are able to connect commerce platforms to social media platforms to banking platforms to payment networks and in the near future the metaverse, right? It also means regionalized payment options if I sell internationally. I mean, I certainly would be looking at the dominance of e-transfer in Canada and what that says about its familiarity and ubiquity amongst Canadians. I mean, talk about a regional preference there. So smart retailers, I guess, know that identifying shopper preferences are key to driving sales success and building customer loyalty. And those preferences, like everything else, are constantly evolving. They're being shaped by socioeconomic conditions, differing attitudes on debt and spending, and we're starting to see new levels of fiscal responsibility. So overall, I guess the trend I'm watching is the shift in commerce, including where we buy things, how we pay for them. This is going to start changing faster than we think.
That's great. All right, Peter, and let's try and keep it tight so we get our other questions in.
It's a matter of choice, and it's a matter of offering solutions for people that work for them. And I think that goes for merchants as well as customers and clients. So the trends, I think the trends are all these things are starting to now sort of gain momentum, and I think it's partly the pandemic, and it's partly fintech, and it's a number of different sources. I mean, credit cards certainly are sticky because I get miles for it. Not that I ever get a chance to use those miles, but I get to create. I got 14 more miles, right? I've got hundreds of thousands of miles, and I can't go anywhere. And it's sort of like, do I pay off my balance? Do I keep my balance paid off? Am I paying exorbitant interest rates for that kind of thing? And is there a better, faster, maybe not faster, but is there a better, secure way to pay? And I think people are starting to open their minds a little more to alternatives. And as those alternatives continue to be offered, then I think people maybe take a second look at it. And the natural sort of thing isn't just to throw down your credit card.
Right.
So there's the short answer.
All right. And I know all of us could probably go on for a while here, but Corinne, do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that during the pandemic, there was a huge shift, and it was quite interesting to see how small businesses sort of reacted to that and how they became innovative in their approaches. And it's going to be interesting to see what sticks and what doesn't, right? Because it's a combination of what consumers want, and obviously businesses want to make sure that they're providing the consumers what they want when it comes to payments, but that has to be balanced for a small business with the costs. And ultimately, at the end of the day, credit cards are seen as a very high cost way of doing business for small merchants. So those companies that can come in and give an alternative method of payment that consumers are going to like and small businesses can afford, I think will have gotten the sweet spot out of this, right? But I will say that, like, for a lot of small companies, we saw the doubling of going online from 20 to 40%. So a lot of them are doing that, but they weren't always doing payments through e-commerce. They were doing payments over the phone. They were doing payments using their traditional pad, even though it was over the phone, or bringing it with them because it's remote. There was all these sort of e-transfers, as I said, became more popular. So there's all kinds of things that kind of happened. And what will result from that as we move more into recovery mode and what will stick going forward, I think will be really interesting to watch in terms of that balance between what consumers want in order to pay and what businesses from the small business perspective are willing to offer given the cost that may be associated with it. So it could be very exciting going forward.
Great. And Tara.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that reference. What's going to stick? We all became very creative in the last few years. creative in trying to deal with, having our stores closed or open or closed or open or closed or not sure what. I think sticking from the customer perspective is going to be what's important, because everything takes investment. And while I think many of us, many Canadians were very patient with businesses as we worked our way through how to transact in the last 2 years, that bar is going to rise for customers. Customers are going to expect a certain change in their shopping behavior, maybe not returning to the 2020 or the 2019. They're probably going to have a higher expectation now, because they've been dealing in a world of digital, still love the idea of physical, now thinking about the two coming together. But affordability is truly important. And I think that's where we as retailers need to look at what is affordable and what does match what our consumer demand is, because there's some tender types that aren't affordable on scale. And then when I think about what is actually going to happen in the next few months, I think wallet growth is going to continue. I think that what we all know is we don't leave home without our mobile phone. It's the one thing that we tend to feel in our pockets and our purses to make sure that we have. I think that there's going to be a transition to everything being kind of tapped by their mobile phone. And I certainly am anticipating some sort of need for integration from a social perspective. I'm looking at social selling when I think about the next step in omni-channel for the source. How do we bring social selling to life as we see the younger demographics shift into social? And I also see the world of, I'm looking at voice search, right? The idea of being able to shop through your assistants in your home. There's going to have to be a connectivity to a payment type. And what does that look like? And how does that come to life? And how do retailers use it in a different way? Probably not in the next few months, probably in the next few years. But as we think about bridging that gap from a physical and a digital, I think those are some of the emerging things.
That's great. All right, so we do have one question here that I'll see if we can get through. So the question was, are there any suggestions for small businesses trying to create an online presence? And I guess, Corinne, will probably start with you on that as the advocate for small business.
Well, it's certainly not a simple area to get into, but I mean, as we always say, the website is where you got to start. Just getting your online presence is going to be important, whether that's through website or social media, as number one. If you want to then sell through an online, that's where it becomes a bit more complicated, right? So first you have to get people to find you, and then you have to figure out a way to make sure you can sell your product. So that's where, of course, there's certainly a lot of organizations that can provide sort of, I guess, easy to use functionality when it comes to e-commerce, but they're not inexpensive. So that is something I think people have to sort of weigh. Sometimes if they go sort of with the boxed package, it can be a bit more pricier than if they try to go on their own. So there's lots, it really depends on how much of a presence you want to have online, right? How much is that investment worth? Is it, I think, as Tara said, how do you sort of match what you're doing physically with what you want to do online, and where do you want to make those investments? So I know a lot of small businesses who moved onto sort of an online platform during the pandemic because to keep their businesses going. Many of them are giving it up now because it just became too much work to have sort of two of these things to manage now, right? Or it didn't provide what they thought it would provide, because you have to be actively engaged in bringing people to your site, and it can be really hard to compete with the Amazons when it comes online, right? So those are some of the things you have to think about when you want to do an online presence. There are a lot of resources out there, though, to help small businesses through that. Digital Main Street being one, if you're in Ontario. So there are organizations out there that can help if you're really serious about getting an online presence, because it isn't just a website's important, but that's just the step one. There is going to be a lot of other steps to it to really sort of bring customers to your site.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I can perhaps just add. I know, you mentioned some of the online platforms, and they can be expensive and kind of difficult to maintain. And yeah, some of those points are valid, but at the same time, there are some pretty simple turnkey solutions that a small business could look at, by going with, let's say, a Shopify, where they can get their website and their payments and their checkout all in one solution. And there's a lot of, kind of small, Canadian businesses that help in, configuring these websites and consulting as well as that. So there are a lot of great options out there. I go back to Shopify. We launched DirectPay on that platform, and it's been, when I look at how you configure your store from the admin panel and add payment options and checkout options and stuff, there's some really simple ways to get online and sort of test the waters and before you start to get into more advanced solutions. So there are lots of opportunities. I do think that some of those turnkey platforms are a great place to start, at least trial and get comfortable with what you're doing and while you evaluate other options as well.
And if you don't, I would say if the goal isn't to do transactions online and you actually want to just build out awareness, I would first start with Google My Business. Claim your business. There's actually a real transition from traditional Google, like paid search, into local search. I mean, how often do we all search restaurants near me, gas station near me? If you take your Google My Business and start to drive that and own that, you'll start to present when customer or people are searching for your product or for your area.
It's great. It's some really good points, everyone. So one final question here from the audience. We talked about payment methods as additive. What are our views on QR code payments and PayPal as one example? So is anyone, Tara, are you guys thinking about QR codes in store or online? Like, is that on your radar?
I wouldn't say we're thinking about it from a payment perspective. We're certainly thinking about it of how to bring digital into stores, just given customers still people love physical retail. They love going and browsing. But how do we take all of the investment we've made in our digital platform and bring it to life in store? I see that's probably our focus for QR codes. I don't think we're at a point in time where we want to take payment in our physical stores. We're an assisted sell model. We want to engage with customers, so we don't want to take away all of that human interaction.
Great. Anyone else want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I guess, just with QR codes being a convenient way to call up a payment link, I think there's some great areas that retailers could, drive innovation with. I forget who mentioned the comment that we all carry our mobile phone with us, and I agree. I mean, I feel lost without mine. I feel naked without mine. So we have the phone with us, and it's incredibly simple. And I think we all got kind of used to scanning QR codes, with menus and bringing up, vaccine passports and stuff like that recently. So I think there has been a little bit more adoption with QR codes and familiarity with them with Canadians, and so that gives us the opportunity now to try and experiment with, hey, can I put a QR code on an invoice? Can I put it on a counter card at my store? Where else can I display a QR code to call up a payment link? And it's just putting aside the payment method for a second, I think the opportunities with retailers to try and see, how can I innovate with my retail storefront or my online presence with these codes, and is there an opportunity to provide more ways for a customer to interact with my products? And absolutely, I think we're going to start seeing some experimentation here, and I know we support QR code payment links with DirectPay as well, and really looking at the imagination of retailers on what we can do with it.
Great. Sorry, we'll need to wrap here because we're down to our last 20 seconds. So thanks, everyone. I think the key theme is choice equals inclusion, if I was to kind of summarize the session. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Hope you get a chance to check out some of the other great sessions, and have a great day and rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.